That refresh you've been putting off until the right deal came along? It's here! Wayfair's Black Friday and July sale is happening now, so you can finally get the style you've been waiting for less. Get up to 80% off area rugs and up to 60% off outdoor and bedroom furniture. Shop Wayfair's huge selection of styles and find the piece to fit your style, budget, and space. Plus, free shipping. Black Friday in July ends July 27th. Shop today at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Well, the question is, would you rather see a Van Halen cover band or David Lee Roth on his most recent tour?
Give me DLR, baby.
I'm with you.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Bob Crawford here. Thrilled to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline. It's the show where you ask the questions. And the best way to get us a question is to record a video or a voice memo on your phone and email it to, where else? AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Okay. Today's question is all about Hollywood. And when the topic is anything related to film, I like to reach out to this guy, Mark Ellis, comedian and Rotten Tomatoes correspondent. Mark, thanks for being here.
Hey, I appreciate that intro, Bob. I'll keep showing up. If you keep referring to me as when you think Hollywood, you think of this guy, then I'll be on every episode if you need me. This feels good.
I got to say, I liked you, and then I found out you're from North Carolina, so I really like you.
Oh, okay. So your audience may not be able to see this, but I got my Demon Deacon tattoo.
Oh my gosh! Well,
I'm a Wake Forest Demon Deacon for life. So go Deeks.
It's going to be, if you're an ACC, I'm a Tar Heels fan, but I respect all the ACC teams. And if you're an ACC fan, it's going to be a good basketball year. It should be a pretty good year all around for all those teams.
That's
many
right.
of those teams.
And you and I can root against Duke together.
That's right. That's what we have. One of the things we share in common. The other thing we share in common are a love for film and a love for history. So, Mark, here's the question we were hoping you could help us answer today.
Hi, this is Sarah in Houston, Texas. My question is, how did Hollywood studio heads manage to keep the industry alive during the Great Depression? Also, how were people able to afford going to the movies when some could barely afford food?
Now, Mark, for some context, the Great Depression lasted for most of the 1930s. You had maybe the entire 1930s, really. You had 25% unemployment, global economic uncertainty, which fueled political extremism. People lost their entire life savings, a lot of challenges. At that time, what is happening in Hollywood?
It's a great question. And what's happening in Hollywood in terms of the big studio heads versus what the audiences are doing are two different answers. So if you're looking at what is Hollywood doing, at the time of the Great Depression, when the stock market crash officially happened, and that big sort of, I guess, anti-boom that started the Depression in October of 1929, you had movie studios having their own reckoning. Nothing to do with the economics of the United States or the world. They were figuring out, oh man, this sound thing is really going to catch on. And so we're going from the silent movie era into a movie where now the actors can talk and they can perform, and you no longer need these giant orchestras playing in a movie house. You just have a soundtrack to everything. So the technological innovations that were happening in Hollywood around the time of the Depression, it seems like a polar opposite to what's going on economically. And the impact that the Great Depression was going to have on these big studios was something that was wholly unanticipated. It wasn't so much economic. It was a different way of doing things. And ultimately, I feel like the Great Depression was the seed that would eventually become the plant that destroyed the monopolies that the studios had in Hollywood.
This is the heyday of the Marx Brothers, right? Wizard of Oz comes out at the end of the 1930s. What sorts of movies were big during the Depression?
I love that you brought up the Marx Brothers, because now that we had some sound in movies, and the Marx Brothers could do like their song and dance, because they were very talented, musicians. They were very talented performers, not just doing comedy, but they could have like a song and dance number at the end of some of their movies. So the big movies that were happening at the dawn of the 30s were these musicals, but they were so oversaturated at the beginning of the 30s that a lot of them went away by 1931 or 1932 because folks were just tired of them. It wasn't until you had a different way to tell those stories that you got a resurgence of the song and dance numbers. Around that time, you also had the Universal pictures that were getting into horror movies. You had your Dracula, you had Frankenstein, you also had RKO releasing King Kong in 1933, and then you have these whimsical tales like The Wizard of Oz that closed out that decade, but you also had this sweeping historical epic the same year with Gone with the Wind. So I feel like it wasn't just the sound, it wasn't just the depression, it wasn't just the times we live in. It just feels like that's the natural evolution of cinema that happened to hit in the 30s, where now audiences showing up to a movie house had a lot of different tastes satisfied. It wasn't just one thing anymore, where it feels like the studios might have been leaning into song and dance as we turned into the 30s. I think that folks spoke with their wallets, meager as they may have been at the times thanks to the Depression, and they said, we also want to see other types of movies. We like being scared, we like laughing, we like being transported to a different time and place.
I came of age during MTV, when MTV first launches, and you have, looking back on it, and even at the time, you got a sense that music videos, like you said, it was like you could throw anything at, you literally throw paint at the wall, like just to see what would work, and you had all this experimentation. It sounds like you're telling me that's kind of what filmmakers were doing with sound. Now you had sound and you had picture and you could play. Is that kind of your sense?
Yeah, I mean, you had so many more avenues to tell your story. And so, obviously something like The Wizard of Oz isn't going to work as a silent film, but you also have horror movies that don't need a lot of dialogue, but it spices it up. And I think that when you're looking at actors from the 20s who are realizing, oh man, our industry is changing dramatically too, and we're not actually going to have to perform this stuff on film, you also have audiences that are now excited to see that kind of stuff. And so if you're looking at reinventing a music video, where the music videos came out and around the early 80s, you could pretty much do whatever you want. You get into the 90s and now you have Guns N' Roses doing these, 7-8 minute epic music videos. It's sort of the way that Busby Berkeley and company reinvented what a song and dance film could be, because we were so bored with them at the dawn of the 30s. And then Busby Berkeley comes along and has these incredible things that just are completely transformative to that genre. And so you have a film like 42nd Street, where it's like, oh, this is what we've been missing. Oh, let's bring this back into the fold. So a lot of this is cyclical, where in our modern movie making appetites, we may feel a little oversaturated with Marvel movies or comic book flicks in general, but then you don't have one for a while and you're like, no, I kind of do like going to the theater to see that. So it's studios figuring out what audiences want and how much of that product they want.
So let's get to the second part of Sarah's question, which were people going to the movies in the 1930s? Like how was that possible? How was it possible for people to go to the movies in the 1930s when they were so cash strapped?
Well, I think you look at any time where folks feel desperation in this country, and the arts and entertainment are always going to be there for you. Some recent examples would be right after 9/11, the New York comedy clubs were packed. Right? You look at something like Vietnam, and there's so much music and movies coming out of that. It's sort of defining that generation. You go all the way back to the Great Depression, right? And you look at the 1930s and audiences. What can they even spend money going to theaters? Well, they're going to need some help. And the theaters needed help to get audiences in there. So what the theaters started doing is this was the beginning of promotions and like, hey, you can come see a double feature now. And they had penny theaters in small towns where it literally cost that much to go see a movie. movie, they also started doing raffles. They started doing giveaways. Sometimes you would go to a movie and you just not only wanted to see a movie, but you also wanted to know what's going on in the world. You could watch a newsreel in front of the film. This wasn't like you could just turn on the TV and catch the news anytime. So it was one of those things where what happens when there's dark times in your real world with any of us? We do want to escape. We're going to have to deal with those problems at some point, but to get a break from it, to get taken to an entirely different world. Maybe it's not the magical land of Oz. Maybe you're going to see Gold Diggers of 1933, right? It doesn't matter what you're seeing. Just to be taken away in a movie theater was one of the few places back then, back in this day, they didn't have bars where you could throw axes for fun on Friday night. They didn't have mini golf courses everywhere yet. They didn't have a lot of amusement parks. This was the place to go to get away from your troubles and your worries. And I think that with the increased offerings and the increased variety of offerings, it seems weird to say that Dracula was a big hit when it came out around this time period. But you think about it, when there's scary stuff in real life, sometimes we do just want to go to a movie and get scared that way.
Yeah, we're talking about how the advent of sound kind of broke the old studio system, the old way Hollywood worked. Talk about the studio system that rose out of that during the Depression. How did the studio system work?
So the way the studio system worked at the dawn of the Depression this is in the 20s going into the 30s, is you had your big five studios, right? And these all operated sort of like one of my favorite menu items at Taco Bell, the 7-layer burrito, right? They had every layer in-house. It was a vertical kind of structure where they had the production, they had the distribution, they even owned the theaters where the movies were going to be shown. They also had very cheap contracts with everyone from directors to writers to stars, where they could have these stars appear in multiple films at 10 cents on the dollar. And so it was very studio friendly. It was not necessarily person friendly. One of the things that came out of the Depression was the New Deal. FDR comes into office and he's got his big speech when he becomes president. He says, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And it feels like the whole country is going to try to rally with the New Deal. Now, the New Deal did not impact Hollywood in and of itself. But one of the things that the New Deal started to focus on was labor organizations. And when you look at Hollywood, what do we talk about all the time now? We talk about SAG, we talk about the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild. All of these things were sort of born out of this time period, with the Screen Actors Guild being a big one that sort of helped bust these monopolies where now actors have some empowerment. The other thing they could do at the time is go to Poverty Row. Not quite as scary as it sounds, but Poverty Row was smaller studios that were sort of needing to outsource. They needed to rent equipment. They needed to go have a star come to them, so to speak. You had guys like John Wayne got his start there. Humphrey Bogart would occasionally appear in these Poverty Row movies that most of which don't even exist now. You can't find them anywhere. There's a few you can still track down, but this was one of the ways to get around the studio system at the time. And when the Depression hits, these are actually somewhat salient options for theaters because it's just not under the big studio title. So as we get into the late 30s and going into the 40s, studios are realizing that this monopoly thing is not going to be lasting forever. And there's a landmark case with Paramount in the late 1940s that kind of sealed the deal where it busted the monopolies that big studios had over Hollywood.
Is there a Poverty Row film that you can kind of bring in that we all heard of?
It's nothing that people have really heard of. I mean, there's some. It's more the stars than you have like the exact movies. There's one called Mr. Wong Detective. I think there's one called Black Gold, and it's just it's nothing that most folks have ever heard of, but. What they served in the history of Hollywood is more about the spirit of how to make an independent film, because this was really the first independent films because they were not associated with either the 5 big studios or the 3, quote, little big studios like your Universal Pictures and stuff. So this was really the way to get a film made before we could just take our cell phone and go out with our friends and make stuff and put it up on TikTok.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
On the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on the Disgraceland podcast, I explore the wild lives of rock stars and unbelievable true crime stories from music history. These are the stories you haven't heard, the kind you'll end up telling someone else. Like the time Paul McCartney spent in a notorious prison, or the bizarre crime Lady Gaga is accused of, or that time Blondie's Debbie Harry escaped Ted Bundy. Listen to Disgraceland on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Mark Ellis, comedian and Rotten Tomatoes correspondent. We're talking about Hollywood in the Great Depression. How did it survive? Well, the only way for us to survive is if you send us your questions about American history. So please remember, record yourself using the voice memo app on your phone and email it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. That's americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. So you mentioned that for example, Fox Films, right? 20th Century Fox owned the movie theater that their films would play in. Actors and writers worked for specific studios. There was no TV at home. There was no Netflix. Because of all that, was the Depression the golden age for Hollywood?
It was the only game in town, it feels like, to get an escape from everything that's happening in your real life and what you're looking at on the newspapers. And even I think reading a book, it would pale in comparison in this one way, in that you're not completely overwhelmingly taken to a different world. You can use your imagination, but to just be able to take a mental break from the strain of everyday life, there is nothing better today, or especially back then, we didn't have a lot of other options to go to sit in a dark theater and watch a story being told to you on the screen. And I think that one of the big things that gets lost in this is, yes, you had a lot of folks struggling, but it's not just being transported and being able to be told a story and forget about your cares and your troubles. It's the fact that you're doing it with a community of folks, most of whom are strangers to you, but you're sitting in a dark room and you're all in this together. And a lot of the stories that were being told on that screen have that we're all in this together kind of vibe. And so sometimes you have a horror movie, sometimes you have a whimsical comedy, a song and dance movie, but a lot of them felt like, hey, it's we have a team here and we're not hopeless, we're just down right now.
What about gangster films? Were they big during the Depression, or was that after?
The gangster films were okay. So here's a funny story. I think that
I'm thinking of James Cagney.
I was just gonna say James Cagney was actually in. He was known as a dramatic actor, but he was also a song and dance guy. And so James Cagney now was able to do song and dance stuff that he wasn't able to do before because nobody knew that he could do it or wanted to do it. So you have James Cagney. He's always going to be associated with the gangster movies, but he also had an opportunity during the early 30s to be in a couple hey, look at what James Cagney can do. So I would say that this wasn't quite the golden age of gangster films yet, but the train was coming around the tracks. And you also had, going into the 40s, you had a lot of thrillers, and that was sort of the dawn of, you had Double Indemnity come out in 44, you had Citizen Kane in 40, so you had different ways to tell stories, and it's just fun to watch filmmakers back then experiment with all these different techniques and genres, figuring out what works for them.
Thanks to AMC and TCM, AMC's the American Movie Channel.
Turner Classic Movies and the American Movie Channel.
Yeah. I have seen Double Indemnity yearly for the past 3 or 4 years. I've seen that. I studied it way back, taking film classes in college, and I watched it 2-3 weeks ago. Great movie.
It's so good, and what I love about Double Indemnity is that so many people think that it's Hitchcock, and it's not.
Do you was that Wilder? Well, who was the director of that?
It was Billy Wilder, and here's a great story. Billy Wilder directed it, and I believe that as the story goes, Alfred Hitchcock saw it, and Alfred Hitchcock had already done a couple movies by then. And I believe, and he wrote a letter to Billy Wilder, and he said that you can't mention, I can't remember if it was suspense or horror, something like that, or storytelling without Billy Wilder. And it was just to have those two types, to have Alfred Hitchcock give you the sign off that your film noir, your suspense thriller is on the right track. That's saying something. And I also rewatched that movie way too much. I just find it's so good. It's such a great time period. Fred McMurray is just unbelievable in it. That's what a man looks like. And he was probably 15 years younger than me. And when he walks on the screen, he feels like my dad. Like that's a dude back then.
And if you are a person of my age, you remember My Three Sons.
Yeah.
Which is what you grew up, which was a sitcom, I guess. I guess you would consider it a sitcom today. And it was, of course in color. And I guess McMurray plays a single father, right? Maybe a widower, or he's a single father somehow of three sons. But I remember my dad telling me watching that, like, hey, this guy was actually a serious actor. And, I get older and I watch Double Indemnity.
Yeah, okay, and he's a great winemaker. He's a great winemaker, too. McMurray has a great Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. Check it out.
Did not know that.
Yep.
I will check that out. Okay, so we'll do a film noir episode here at some point.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
Mark, in 1934, the head of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors Association said, quote, "No medium has contributed more greatly than the film industry to the maintenance of the national morale during a period featured by revolution, riot, and political turmoil in other countries." Can we break this? I'd like to break this quote down with you.
Yeah. This quote it's serving multiple purposes, right? Because it's true, I believe, to a certain extent, is that you are building national morale where you have a community place where people can go and they can, not think about what's going on in the real world for a little bit. That's awesome. That's great. But for studios, this was an important thing to say because it kind of let the government know, hey, we're doing okay with our system here. We don't really want you interfering. And I think one of the reasons why they had a stricter enforcement of the Hays Code in the mid-30s. The Hays Code was something that came out where it didn't want anything too morally lewd to be seen in movies. And so they started more strict enforcement of the Hays Code, where even something like Dracula, the Bela Lugosi in Dracula, that probably would have had a couple scenes come out. And as a matter of fact, there's some prints that had scenes cut out once the Hays Code was being more enforced. And I say all this to say the reason why they were enforcing the Hays Code more around the time that this quote was given is to let the government know, hey, wink and nod, we're taking care of, we're not putting anything bad, we're not putting anything racy in our movies, so maybe leave us alone and let those watchdogs not worry about the monopolies we've created with our studio system. So it's serving multiple purposes with that quote.
And you talked about the rise of like the unions and this and that, and we'll see later, Ronald Reagan will come out of this, right? He's an actor who becomes a union representative for actors, and he's on the side of labor. He jumps to the other side, becomes president of the United States in the 1980s.
That's right.
But,
and Ronnie Reagan was in a couple of those. I believe one of his first big breaks was a Poverty Row film. So I think I believe he started in Poverty Row films as well. So hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right, Ron?
That's what he would say.
That's what he would say.
But is this the time period where we begin to get into a rating system and I guess I'm sure there were religious organizations and groups and government were probably, like this quote kind of alludes to, suspicious of the studios.
Yeah, you had to do something because it became untenable after a while to just have this sort of arbitrary code that was being enforced or wasn't being enforced, and so you needed to sort of have something more centralized. Even though I think the studios were resistant of that idea. Initially, for obvious reasons, they didn't want to make something. They kind of wanted to make whatever they could and just say, hey, okay, this thing, don't worry, checks all the boxes, you don't have to worry about it, as opposed to actually having some oversight just in terms of what general audiences versus what more adult audiences can take in.
What are your thoughts on this? Like the idea that film being a distraction, like we've already kind of talked about that a little bit, and you've mentioned that. Like it is this, like, let me put my brain down for a second, or just like, let me put my cares away and focus on something else. Is there a flip side argument where, the world's in dire straits, we need to be solving problems, not bringing Stranger Things into every commercial that exists this past couple months? But what do you think about that? The flip side of the distraction argument.
Yeah, I think that we're such a kind of consumer culture, and I think that everybody has to find your balance. That's the key here. It's balance. It's not, it's not eating pizza every day, but it's also not killing yourself at the gym. It's finding a balance between it. And the nice thing is that the movies aren't going away, and they aren't something that just shows up when times are tough everywhere, right? Times might be tough for you, and they might be great for somebody else. It's actually very rare that you have something like a Great Depression where everybody is feeling it at the same time. And so this is why we need movies. This is why we need movie theaters. This is just somewhere to go to. You're not putting stuff off permanently. You're not saying I'm never talking to that person again, or I'm never going to get that job. But sometimes it's nice to just get a different perspective. And I guarantee you go in and you see a movie and you're walking out with a slightly different take on the world. And I go back to something that I learned when I was in 8th grade, and that's how to study, right? And it's like you think you just got to cram that book and you got to read it from cover to cover until you're done reading it. You're not going to retain all that information that way. You read you read a chapter, you take notes, maybe you take a break. You take a break every 30 minutes. That's what movies and entertainment is good for. It's taking a break from everything else you're doing, and you should do it every so often because it gives you freshness when you come back to the real problems that you do have to solve in your life. So it doesn't matter what kind of movie you're seeing. It's nice to get your brain on a different track for a little while. Just don't keep it there all day. Maybe don't binge the entirety of the new Stranger Things season. Maybe watch a couple episodes and come back tomorrow night. Watch it like a mini series used to be on TV.
Well, Mark, it's easy for historians they do a good job at the past, right? They're good at the past. They're terrible at predicting the future. So you're a comedian and a journalist. So I want to get your opinion on this before we part ways. There are a lot of current threats to Hollywood. There's streaming, there's artificial intelligence, there's piracy. What do you think's there's consolidation? What do you think's going to happen over the next few years?
So when I look at the consolidation aspect is honestly for me right now is the most nebulous part of this whole thing, where you feel like, at least the hope with AI is that it's going to be a thing that is lurking around arts and entertainment, right? And it doesn't, if you're watching a commercial with a polar bear that looks funny on it, or it doesn't really matter what it is. It's not new. And I think that the more that AI sort of infiltrates arts and entertainment, the more there's going to be a need for fresh voices, human voices, to make stuff. And we just need to be there to show up to watch it, right? So I think that it doesn't matter if it's streaming, whether you're supporting it with your click of your remote, you're going out to buy a ticket to see something. There's going to be those community things where, even if you're not going to see a movie in a theater, you take the example of something like Stranger Things. It's like, you want to be able to talk about this with other people, right? These are sort of like big things that we all want to relate to. And so stay in the game. As far as where everything is going, I don't think you're ever going to lose movie theaters, because I just think that experience, being around people in a theater, having that shared sort of community aspect is so important to us. And it feels like, with everybody sort of their faces in their phones all day, that is something that is going to become more vital in the future, not less important. With AI, I have no idea. I just know that it's not telling anything original. If you just want rehashes, sure. If you want original voices, then that's where you support and you champion filmmakers coming up right now.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm in the music business, and the one place it can't touch us is selling tickets to a concert and being there in person in front of people and playing music and being living art, like art in the moment. And so I imagined that there will be, the AI is going to continue to infiltrate the film or the recorded audio, but there will be a backlash to it, because we need humans making art.
Yeah, we do. And look, I'm a huge Van Halen fan, right? And I would much rather see a Van Halen cover band than I would watch some AI-generated thing of Eddie Van Halen hanging out with Jimi Hendrix. I don't need that.
That's right.
I don't need that. I want to hear the music. I want to hear it live. I want to hear it done by humans.
Well, the question is, would you rather see a Van Halen cover band or David Lee Roth on his most recent tour?
Give me DLR, baby. He sounded so good in a clip that I saw recently, and he really didn't sound good 5 years ago from some of the stuff I'd seen and shows I'd been to. But he looks like he's got it back together, man. Rest does the body good. And if you're Diamond Dave, stay out there, baby. Keep putting that music out there in the world.
I'm with you on that one. Well, I've been talking with Mark Ellis, comedian and Rotten Tomatoes correspondent.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Bob. And knowing that we have all these things, we discover new things about our friendship every time we do a show together.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtall and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Bass. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on my podcast, Disgraceland, I tell the stories behind music's biggest names. Like how the story of the Foo Fighters isn't just about music, it's about grief, shock, and the moment everything changed. Imagine that. You're in the biggest band on the planet, as Dave Grohl was in 1994 in Nirvana. And the phone rings, and you learn that your singer, your friend, the reluctant voice of a generation, Kurt Cobain, is dead. Listen to Disgraceland on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.